I had generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed with that and major depressive disorder. And so I had like these two storms happening in my head, like one that made me want to go, go, go and do everything and solve all the world's problems, and another that just wanted me to stay in bed and just, keep my head under the covers and just hide away from all my insecurities and hide away from all the demands and pressures for my job. Um, had to be hospitalized twice in a inpatient mental health facility to address my just I was in crisis mode. Um, but that saved my life. I've since learned that post stroke anxiety and post stroke depression are very common. And there's just not enough, they don't tell you about it, or they don't, when they say watch for signs, I mean, everyone experiences depression differently, everyone experiences anxiety differently. I really wish, and this is kind of what I want to get out there, is that we should have mental health therapy as part of our rehab. So, as when you're going for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, they should also offer mental health therapy and help you just get ahead of it. And somebody should have said, Angie, do not go back to work after 8 weeks.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to the Recovery After Stroke podcast. If you are a stroke survivor with a story about your stroke experience, now is the perfect time to join me on the show. The interviews are not scripted. You do not have to plan for them. All you need to do to qualify is be a stroke survivor who wants to share your story in the hope that it will help somebody else who is going through something similar. If you are a researcher who wants to share the findings of a recent study, or you are looking to recruit people into studies, you may also wish to reach out and be a guest on my show. If you have a commercial product that you would like to promote that is related to supporting stroke survivors to recover, there is also a path for you to join me on a sponsored episode of the show. Just go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, fill out the form, explain briefly which category you belong to, and I will respond with more details about how we can connect via Zoom. Now, this is episode 267, and in today's conversation, I'm joined by Angie Read, who experienced a stroke at age 46 and has overcome some major challenges, including depression and anxiety, and written two books about stroke recovery, the first being called Invisible Scars, the second titled Mental Health Hacks, and the third, which is not yet available, but will be soon, is called Identity Crisis, You Are Not Your Career. Now, just before this interview gets underway, I wanted you to know that Angie has been so gracious to share with me a link that enables listeners of this episode to download a free PDF version of her book, Invisible Scars, from Amazon. There's only one catch. Well, it's more like a request. If you do download the book and enjoy it, please leave a review on the Amazon page of the book, because that is how Amazon understands if the book is a good read and worth suggesting to other people looking for this type of content. Basically, authors live and die by reviews on Amazon, so everything you can do to help will support other stroke survivors receiving great suggestions of helpful books. That's it for now. It's on with the show. Angie Read, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Well, let's see, just a little over 6 years ago, when I was 46, I got up one morning, or tried to get up one morning, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't feel anything on the left side of my body. It was very surreal. I didn't know what was happening to me. I just thought maybe I was still half asleep. But I was kind of shaking the bed as I was trying to get my body up and get up out of bed to go take a shower and get ready for work. And I woke my husband up and he said, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm trying to get up and take a shower." And it came out all garbled. And he said, "You sound drunk." And I said, "It's 6:30 in the morning. I'm not drunk." And he said, I'm getting up. He got up, turned on the light, looked at me and said, your face looks like it's sliding off on the left. You're having a stroke. I'm calling 911. And I said, don't call 911. I'm sure I'm just still asleep. And he said, you are not making any sense. And thank God he didn't listen to me because I was in the middle of having a pretty massive ischemic stroke. I had two clots, one in my neck and one in my front temporal lobe, right side. Um, and I had to be rushed to the hospital. The EMTs came, took me to a hospital that's like a mile from my house, and they did a CT scan that showed the clots, and then they rushed me down to a hospital downtown Kansas City, and they did an emergency thrombectomy where they went up through an artery in my groin all the way up and like into my brain and pulled the clot out. And I was awake for the whole surgery. I only remember bits and pieces of it, but
You're
then I
so
woke up in the neuro ICU, and the nurse was asking me if I could raise my arm, and I could. And it was maybe an hour and a half after I got there. I don't know. I lost all track of time.
you're so considerate about the guys at 911.
What about it?
You were considerate about it. You didn't want to wake them.
I I don't know. I didn't know how serious it was. I mean, I was 46, otherwise very healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was completely out of the blue. So it just I didn't want to waste anybody's time. I thought
Yeah.
they were going to get here, and I mean, I really honestly I didn't think too much about it. It was just kind of a reaction. Don't call 911. I'm sure I'm fine. That's
Yeah.
kind of always been my MO. I'm fine. I rub some dirt on it and brush it off and get up and go.
But you had two clots. So how did two clots form? And was there an underlying cause?
I'm not sure how two clots formed. They originally thought I might have had a carotid artery dissection, so a CAD. Turns out that I didn't, so I don't know how that clot got in my neck. They think after a series of, process of elimination that it was because I have a high factor 8 clotting factor in my blood, and then I was on birth control pills, and I also had suffered from migraines my entire life. And actually, the weekend before I had the stroke, I had the most severe migraines for 2 straight days that I'd ever had. And kind of crazy because I actually went to the ER for the migraines. My sister was an ER nurse at the time, and she said, "Come in, check yourself in. We'll get you like an IV cocktail for the migraine." And I complained to the ER doctor on call that night that because I get migraines with auras where I get like a C-shaped blind spot in one of my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that blind spot had just gotten bigger and bigger over the weekend, which had never happened in my life. And so they did a CT scan, but that CT scan came back totally clear. And that was 2 days before the stroke. And so I don't know. I mean, process of elimination, they think it was a combination of birth control pills and my high factor 8. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's still one of those things. It's like sometimes you don't get a definitive answer,
Yeah.
but you get like a process of elimination. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Fair enough. Birth control pills seem to feature in a lot of the interviews that I do with women who've had strokes. And is it something that you were aware of before you were prescribed the birth control?
You know, I hate to say no, because any smart person should read the fine print on any medication, and they do warn of risk of heart attack and stroke, but with every medication, that's basically a risk factor. I had been on birth control pills on and off since I was a teenager. You know, the only reason I was on birth control in my 40s was to control my cycle. And I was very angry at my general practitioner for not warning me and not saying, as a woman in your 40s, this is probably not a good idea, and warning me about, the potential risks. But she never did, and I didn't ask because I'd been on them so long. It was just kind of like, I have never had a problem. I'll be fine. So, and I had, no history of high cholesterol, high blood pressure. I didn't ever smoke. I've always been a very, very healthy person. So I didn't, yeah, it just didn't factor into my decision. And gosh, if I could do it over again, I would have jumped down my throat and said, do not even consider being on birth control in your 40s. It's
Yeah.
just, it's not necessary. There are other ways to control your cycle. There are other things you can do than be
Yeah.
on, hormones.
Yeah. That being said, have you been able to move ahead from the anger that you had around that? Has that something that has been able to subside? Is it still there? Have you even thought about it?
Yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't spend a lot of my life just, sitting in a place of anger because it only makes me miserable. And I try to forgive and move on. And it's not like my doctor was trying to hurt me or
Yeah.
be, be anything other than professional. It is what it is, and I just have to accept it and move on. And I'm very lucky, so I feel like I don't have much to be angry about. Have regained like 99.9% of my capacity, my facilities, my physical everything. So I have nothing to be angry about.
Yeah. Fair enough. What kind of work were you doing at the time? Or actually, what was your life like? How busy was it? What were you up to?
Yeah, busy. So I had just written my first book, and it was a marketing book because I've been in marketing and communications for about 30 years.
Okay.
I
What's
had
it
just
called?
written
Just in
my
case there's any marketers listening and they want to listen.
oh
What's it called?
The first one's called Marketing to Gen Z. So it's about marketing to the youngest generation. Well, no longer the youngest generation. Now there's Gen Alpha, but Gen Z is the generation right behind millennials. And I was fascinated with Gen Z for close to a decade. And I have three kids. They're all Gen Z, and I kind of felt like I had this focus group of three at home, and what I was seeing and learning about this generation. Every marketer at the time that I knew, everyone was focused on how do we crack the nut with marketing to millennials, and nobody was talking about Gen Z. And I was like, hey, we should start talking about the next generation because we all got caught off guard with millennials. And so let's get ahead of this next generation. And I started doing my own research and I realized that they're just so fascinating. And I just I had a passion for that. So I had just finished my book. I'd turned it into the publisher, and then I had gone to speak at a couple of conventions, speaking gigs that I had for my work. I worked at an agency at the time, a marketing agency, and they foot the bill for me to write that book. Um, so that's what I was doing up until then. And yeah, very, very busy life, raising three kids, always been very active, very involved in professional organizations, and just kind of always have to have something going on.
Hmm. So, so then you wake up one morning. What the routine of that day was completely obviously thrown out the window. What were you meant to be doing that morning, and how does the family react and respond? I know your husband said 911 for you, but how does the rest of the day unfold? What happened?
Let's see. Well, my oldest son, who was just getting ready to start college at the University of Kansas, which is only like 30-minute drive from where we lived, but he was getting ready to move and go to college. But my husband had him come in and watch me while he called 911 because I was still trying to get up and go to work. It's just, my work ethic, it was not going to stop. It was just like, I'm going to be late. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to be late. I got to go. And so my son, who was a lineman football player all through high school, really, really big kid, came in and like tried to hold me down so that I wouldn't get out of bed and hurt myself because I was about to probably fall out and hurt myself. As the EMTs got there, my middle son was just getting up, and he came out of his room just as they were wheeling me out and down the hall. And he freaked out, like, what the heck is happening? Where's mom going? And so that was a rude awakening for him. And then my daughter, who was in middle school at the time, she didn't know anything until they woke her up and told her. My older stepson came over to hang out with the kids that day just to help them, stay calm. And then he drove them down to the hospital after I was out of surgery and it was clear I was going to be okay. Um, and then I was supposed to be in a meeting that day. I was getting ready to travel to New York like that following week. And I was putting some finishing touches on a presentation. And I remember I got a phone call and I actually took the phone call from the hospital bed because I felt like, oh, I have to let this person know that I probably won't be there next week.
Yeah.
And it was strange. I remember taking the call and she's like, um, we had regularly scheduled meeting and I said, I'm so sorry, I'm in the hospital, I had a stroke. And she's like, why are you answering your phone? Well, I have to wrap up some loose ends, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't just become non-business people or workers or whatever we were just because we had a stroke. There's things to do. I was running my business from my hospital bed for the first 7 days that I was in hospital. Absolutely taking phone calls, sending emails, writing up quotes, doing everything, just taking the admin role over, and then had the guys running around doing their thing. And for me, it was business as usual, but I was in hospital. I wasn't allowed to leave. But that's the identity is there, and your obligations are there, and the things that are on the to-do list are still there. So I think one of the defaults that happens is you just try to go about life as per normal, and that's what I did, and I think it helped. But it was also the reason why I didn't go to hospital, because my symptoms came on very gradually. It started with my left foot, and then it spread over 7 days, and my entire left side was numb. But because it was so gradual, and because my identity was so deeply embedded in you go to work, you do this and you do that, I just did that, and I ignored everything and said, well, there's nothing wrong with me, even though multiple people asked me over the 7 days before I went to hospital, because they could tell there was something wrong with me. But even though I knew there was something wrong, I played it down.
Yeah, it's probably pretty common to do that. And because it's hard to believe that something like that is happening to you. I mean, young people, it's not supposed to happen to us, young people.
Yeah.
I was in my, 40s. I was 46, almost 47. I'm in my 50s now, but it still feels like I'm too young to have that happen to me, even if it happened to me today. But it's very common, strokes are more common among young people than most people know.
Yeah. It's the leading cause of disability worldwide.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so grateful every day that my husband did not hesitate. He did not listen to me for once in his life. That's probably the only time I will tell him it's okay that he didn't listen to me. But I mean, even a minute longer, who knows? Who knows what would have happened? Um,
Yeah.
but
That's a
you just keep going on autopilot. And, you know, it was hard for me, very, very hard for me to take a step back from my career when I had to be on disability for a while. And I wanted to just jump right back in and finish up my book. It had come back from the publisher with some edits, and I didn't want anyone else editing for me, but because I was on disability, they wouldn't let me even touch it. Um, and that was hard. And so I rushed to get back to work, which was probably a huge mistake.
How long were you in hospital for?
4 days.
Okay. So you rushed to get back to work. How quickly did you get back to work?
Probably 8 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks
Uh,
after. I mean, I was on short-term disability, which lasts, you can get up to 12 weeks, but I was also going stir crazy at home. I wanted to get back. I wanted to get back into my life. And I thought I was ready because I could walk, I could talk. I had passed all my physical, occupational, and speech therapy And so I was kind of like, okay, I'm cured, ready to go back to work.
But you weren't. So, what were
I
your
wasn't.
experiences like when you went to work? What did you feel that you thought, okay, things are not exactly right?
Right off the bat, I started feeling well, I had a lot of anxiety. At the time, I didn't label it as that. I didn't really know what it was. I just felt very uneasy at work. And I felt like I was losing control of my ability to write, and, that I wasn't writing as cohesively as I had before, or easily as I had before. And then I started feeling very, I don't know. I think it was from some of my medications, but I wasn't sleeping very well at all. And I was having horrible insomnia, which then started feeding this beast inside of me of anxiety and depression. And I wasn't eating. I had no appetite, and I knew I needed to have nutrition and proper sleep for my brain to heal. And I couldn't do either of those things. And then I was trying to, be superwoman at work and not miss a beat, and was having so much trouble feeling like I could even write. And here I was like trying to edit my book. And then what struck me was I started to get very obsessed with some of the small details of the book. And I've never been an obsessive personality, but I got very, very obsessed about the details, like even the end notes and the footnotes. I was freaking out over them. And by Thanksgiving, so I went back to work in mid-September. By Thanksgiving of that year, I was just like completely tired, completely just, I had lost 20 pounds just in 2 months from not eating. And I couldn't think straight. And I was miserable. My parents said that I was like a shell of my former self. And my voice had no affect. I wasn't, had no intonation or inflection. I was very monotone. And I I say I had a nervous breakdown. I know that's not like a medically appropriate thing to say anymore, but it's the only way I can describe it. I couldn't function. I didn't know if I had brain damage from the stroke that was keeping me from being able to write, or what was actually happening. Looking back at it now, I was able to write. It's not that I wasn't. I just had lost like all my self confidence, and I was just in a really bad place. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Before I left hospital, they told me to be on the lookout for signs of anxiety or depression because it's common among stroke survivors. I'm like, okay, I never had anxiety or depression really in my life before. Well, I had some anxiety, like low grade anxiety, I call it. I had never had like um, whatever they call it. I can't think of the word right now, but
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
I had generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed with that and major depressive disorder. And so I had like these two storms happening in my head, like one that made me want to go, go, go and do everything and solve all the world's problems, and another that just wanted me to stay in bed and just, keep my head under the covers and just hide away from all my insecurities and hide away from all the demands and pressures for my job. Um, had to be hospitalized twice in a inpatient mental health facility to address my just I was in crisis mode. Um, but that saved my life. And then I had to go on disability again to be out for intensive therapy and intensive medical treatment to help with those conditions. It was horrible. I've since learned that post-stroke anxiety and post-stroke depression are very common, and there's just not enough. They don't tell you about it, or they don't when they say watch for signs. I mean, everyone experiences depression differently. Everyone experiences anxiety differently. I really wish, and this is kind of what I want to get out there, is that we should have mental health therapy as part of our rehab. So, as when you're going for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, they should also offer mental health therapy and help you just get ahead of it. And somebody should have said, Angie, do not go back to work after 8 weeks. Take your full 12 weeks. You're getting paid. Take your full 12 weeks. I probably still would have pushed back, just my personality, but somebody should have said don't. I know my family was like, wow, that's too fast. But I've never been one to slow down. I've always been kind of set to go mode.
Yeah, yeah. It is an interesting conundrum that people like you face. It's that I hear that a lot. I was at home going stir crazy, and if you've and I'm not sure what's behind that for all the people that say that to me, other than they don't know how to rest and how to switch their mind off and how to heal and recover. It's a brain injury is not like a broken foot. You don't have a timeline on it. It doesn't say, well, within 6 weeks, the plaster cast will come off. Then you'll do a little bit of therapy, rehab work for it, and then you'll be fine. And it'll be healed and you'll be good as new. Uh, if, if I can share anything with people about stroke recovery, it's that you have to do things differently once you've had a stroke. You just have to, because doing things the same way is the way that you were doing things is what got you into the mess you're in, so to speak. And what you don't want to do is replicate the conditions that supported you getting into the trouble that you got into. You want to change things up a little. But I get what you're saying, because it's very common. I probably was similar in that I was going a little stir crazy, but then I found ways to occupy my time that were not out of the house or work related. And that made it a little bit easier for me to not have to overthink things and focus on things that were no good or weren't right. So I just threw myself into a little bit of volunteer work for the Stroke Foundation here in Australia, and anything I could so that I had something to do on a particular given day. And then if I had a task to do, whether it was just go to the shops and get some groceries to bring them home to try and prepare a meal, that was good enough. It was just anything that I could do than sitting on my bum and just overthinking things. I wasn't typically an overthinker. I had negative thought patterns in that I didn't believe in myself, and I didn't believe that I was capable of great things in business or amazing things in my personal life or whatever. I just always had doubts about my abilities, but I never spent time overthinking that. It was just an embedded personality trait. So I was lucky that when it was time for me to stay at home and heal, I could stay at home and heal. Sometimes I had people come and visit me, bring me out, take me to lunch, or go grab a coffee or something, and that was enough to get the ball rolling. I visited my parents and stayed at their house for a few hours every once in a while. Anything I could do. But I get what you're saying, and I love your purpose being that stroke is not just a physical recovery. It is an emotional, it is a mental recovery, and it's a physical recovery. It's the thing that I go on about all the time. And you can't heal from stroke fully if all you've done is the physical recovery. You just can't, because I often got people looking at me and going, and you might experience this as well, is, oh my God, you look great. And you might have looked great because the shell that you're in looks okay. But
Right.
then inside, beneath the layers of that shell, there's all of the stuff going on, the independence loss, the inability to think properly, the inability to work the way that you were, the lack of energy. Your identity has changed. You've become mortal all of a sudden, and some people have
Right.
to wrestle with that and grapple with it and try and work out what does that even mean. Um, and then your relationship changes because you can't be the same way that you were with your family, your children, and your wife or your spouse. And it's turmoil. And the hardest thing was knowing how to engage in a conversation with somebody who said, oh my God, you look great. Okay, so where do I go from here? Do I tell you that looks can be deceiving? Uh, do you need to hear that from me right now? Do I need to tell you that I'm having a mental health day crisis? How do you move on from you look great? And the
Yeah. And
the
I
insurance
had feelings
companies
that
need to come on board. The insurance companies need to come on board.
I felt guilty. I think that I didn't look like a typical stroke survivor
Yeah.
or, but I still, I'm sorry, I still felt a little sorry for myself because I could feel it inside. I knew I couldn't speak as well as I did before. Words took a little while longer to come to me. I did not have aphasia, but it was harder for me to think about words. And I've always been good in front of a crowd. I've always been very self-confident, and my confidence took a big hit. And yeah, you are kind of in denial about the fact that something like this happened to you, and it's kind of embarrassing because it's like, what? Why did did I do something to cause this, or what happened? I mean, when I say, oh yeah, I was on birth control pills and that's why, it's kind of like, well, how stupid was I that I didn't know that that was, an issue? And also then when I was hit with all the emotional, the mental health issues, I didn't know what I was dealing with. And to me, it felt like personal failure. And I am not, I am not one to fail. I, I've never failed at anything, and I felt like I was failing. And and my doctor, when I went back to a very high stress job, and I went back to a job that was not, it wasn't a soft place to land after having a major health crisis. Nobody understood what I was going through. Nobody seemed to. I mean, people cared, but I hadn't worked at this place very long, maybe a year and a half. But I just didn't feel like I had a lot of emotional support, or that they were like handling me with kid gloves, because I told them I didn't need any accommodations. Physically, I'm fine. I don't need anything. So they immediately expected me to produce at 110% like I always had. And that pressure to perform and the pressure that I was putting on myself was just too much for my healing brain to handle.
Mm.
And I didn't, you don't know until you have hindsight. Now, 6 years later, I can say, oh gosh, Angie, why didn't you just take the 12 weeks or longer if you needed it, and really, get to a place where you could understand what was happening to you. And um, but you have to go through it, and you have to live through it yourself and learn your lessons yourself.
Mm.
But I'm just, there was a time when I really wondered why I even survived. I wanted to die. um, and I've always been a very glass half full person, very very positive and always upbeat, and had always had a very just positive outlook on life. And there was a time where I thought, why did God spare me? I shouldn't have survived this stroke. Now I just want to die. My life is empty and I don't have anything to live for. And thank God I didn't follow through on any dire consequences, but I considered it. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's the scariest part of all, is that I got to such a low, dark
Mm.
place. with my mental health. And I asked my neurologist at my next neurology appointment, I said, hey, what's happening to me? I don't understand what's happening to me. This is not who I am. And he said, well, that's psychological, not neurological. You'll have to see a psychiatrist or
Mm.
psychologist.
Uh-huh.
And he was so unkind about it. He was so just cold and matter of fact about it. And here I was bawling in his exam room. He got up and walked out of the room and never came back. My
Oh
husband
boy.
was there with me because I couldn't drive still at the time, and um, we just looked at each other like, did he just say what we think he said? And um, wow, how just cold-hearted and just mean, honestly. And I'm like, I am not an overreactive type of person, but I was just looking for answers. And for him to basically dismiss me like that was, it was just shocking. I had never had a doctor treat me like that and just totally dismiss me. I ended up having another stroke, a smaller stroke, 8 months after my first one. And I probably never would have known about it, but I was in a car accident. It was my fault. I was completely out of it. I ran a red light, T-boned a car. Thankfully, we both walked away. Nobody was hurt. Um, could have been much, much worse. But I did go to the ER that night because I said, I'm on blood thinners. I don't think I hit my head, but it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go get checked out.
Mm.
And long story short, they sent me home that night on painkillers and muscle relaxers. The next morning, I fainted when I got up to take my medicine in the morning. I fainted, um, and it scared the crap out of me. I almost just went back to bed and didn't do anything. But I called my sisters, and they were like, "Hey, that's not right. You need to go back to the ER." Um, so I went back and said, I just survived a stroke and this happened to me. I was here last night after a car accident, and they did a CT scan, and then they did an MRI, and they saw what they called new stroke activity. The the neurologist at the hospital saw me, and this was not like a specialized stroke hospital like the first one that I went to. This was the closest one to the car accident I was in. And the neurologist came in and she had like tears in her eyes and she said, oh, sweetheart. And she just kept putting her hand on my shoulder saying, I did not expect to see somebody in such good shape as you when I came into this room, just based on your scans. She's like, you are so blessed. You do not know how blessed you are, but yes, you have had new stroke activity. And and I said, hey, since I've got you here, as a neurologist, what do you think about is there a connection between strokes and anxiety and depression? And she said, oh yes, it's probably 50% or higher. And I said, well, my other neurologist told me that it was, basically told me it was all in my head and it didn't have anything to do with the stroke. And she said, I'll be right back. She left. She came back a few minutes later with printed scientific studies that proves the connection between stroke and depression and anxiety.
Good on
And she
her.
said, I promise you, she's like, that he is not up on his science. He should not have told you that. And I switched to her on the spot. I said, can I switch to you? Can you be my neurologist going forward? I mean, it's almost like you have to ask permission, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is the other neurologist that has seen me since the beginning, but you're kinder. You seem to get me better. I like your bedside manner better. Will you please, be my neurologist from now on? And it was also at that point, I think I realized that I get to decide who my medical team is. I switched primary care physicians for the same reason. After my stroke, when I was having mental health issues, she was putting me on different medications that were giving me horrible, horrible side effects.
Mm.
And I was begging her to take me off of them. And she just kept, giving me the line, well, you have to give it time, give it time, give it another week, give it another week. I'm like, I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping. I feel horrible. I feel like I'm a chemo patient, actually. And you're telling me to stay on this medication that's making me sick. So I had a friend, luckily, I had a friend who is also a doctor, and I was calling her on the side and asking for her advice. And she said, Angie, you should not be on that medication. If I were your doctor, I would have taken you off of it by now. Those side effects should have gone away. And I said, well, can you be my doctor? Is that weird to be a friend and then have you be my doctor? And she said, no, I would love to be your doctor. I'm the doctor to a lot of my friends. And so I switched to her. It's out of the way. She's like it's a 30-minute drive instead of a 10-minute drive down the road, which where my other doctor was. But she takes care of me. She loves me. She cares. And it's not just me because she's my friend. She's an excellent, excellent doctor. And she's very, very thorough. And she's always asking, all right, what did they say at your last psychiatry appointment? What did they say? What has your neurologist said? What has your cardiologist said? Because now I've got all these specialists, and I was able to kind of pick and choose them along the way, and I made sure that I felt comfortable with every doctor on my team.
That's
And
something I really advocate for, by the way. So I did
yeah,
exactly the same thing. My first group of doctors at the first hospital, they got sacked about 7 weeks into my whole experience. And I went to a new hospital and I found a new team of people and I felt really calm, really comfortable, really supported. And I'm going to generalize here a lot. It was the team previously was being led by an older 70-plus-year-old man, and the new team was led by a probably 50-something-year-old female. And it was just a completely different experience. And they were talking about me at the first part of the diagnosis and the medical support. And then at this new one, they were talking with me about what was happening and what's going on. And I was part of the decision-making process. It wasn't just somebody in a bed where they were making decisions on my behalf. So I think it's another really important point that you raised there. I completely agree with you that you should choose your team of doctors, especially if you're coming across them and you don't like the way that they're approaching it.
yeah, and that's a difficult thing to do because we've been kind of a condition to doctors and figures of authority or know what they're talking about. And neurologists have been trained in this. But honestly, my first neurologist his ego was out of control, and he clearly wasn't up on the latest science, and he wanted to be an authority figure. I found out a couple of years later that there had been a lot of complaints about him, and he he ended up leaving town, but his ego was just out of control. And sometimes medical professionals just that's that's their MO. But
Sometimes
it's
medical
very
professionals
hard.
are also psychopaths by definition. And I'm not saying that they go around doing nasty things to people. I'm just saying in order to get to the point of their level of success in a particular career, uh, to be a good neurologist, you have to have certain traits. And some of those traits are not to be empathetical. For example, when you're looking at scans and to be able to make real clinical decisions about what's happening. So you kind of have to check your emotions in at the beginning of your shift, pop them to the side, do your thing. But then there is a part of that when you're speaking to a human being, you're supposed to be able to switch them off. Now, for him to walk out from the consult because you started crying and not come back, well, that says a lot about a person. And he may be very gifted in his ability to read a scan and tell you how to resolve a neurological problem, but his ability to be gifted in that space perhaps meant that he didn't focus on these other things that are also essential in patient care, which is to maybe offer a box of tissues, if nothing else, if you
Something.
you know
Yes,
just
something. Be a human being.
yeah, just to
you
help you
know,
clean up the snotty nose, whatever.
exactly. Right. I can't. I to this day, I can't believe he didn't come back. I mean, I guess he was just like, okay, you're an emotional mess. I'm leaving. Um, but there was that sensitivity chip that was just missing, and
Yeah.
I don't know. But we have to know that if you are not comfortable with your medical team, you get to choose. You are not stuck. I mean, even if you have horrible insurance, you know, or if you don't have any insurance, you still get a choice, and you get to decide who takes care of you. And I think that's an important lesson. And I'm just so blessed that I was able to find a team of doctors that I feel really, really good about. And they all seem to really care. And they're not part of the same medical system. There's different medical systems that the doctors kind of cross over. But and that was a little bit difficult to navigate. You know, one was through like one medical system and another through a different one. So sometimes the records didn't cross over, and you know, I had to download everything and keep everything on a disk and in a folder that I had to carry around with me. But
All your files, yeah. It's a
yeah.
really cool thing that you raised. So I advocate for some stroke survivors and I coach some stroke survivors. And one of the people who I coached was going to a GP who was really mistreating her. It was a man. This particular lady is in her late 70s. And the conversations that we were having on our regular catch-ups were that, you know, he's just not seeing me. He won't answer my calls. When he does see me, he doesn't see me for long enough. And that person had been the family physician for 30 or 40 years. And there was a little bit of, well, I'm not sure if it was guilt or there was some other emotional attachment to that relationship because that person was also the general practitioner for the husband before he passed away. You know, so there was a lot wrapped up in it. And to convince her to seek another general practitioner out was quite a task. It was a real big task. It was something that I had to do over time. I had to nudge gently, you know, make her feel confident in the decision, make her understand that her care is more important than the history with this particular person. And it took some time, but we got to that point where she sourced another general practitioner, again, not exactly in the same location, and it was a little bit out of the way, but she found a general practitioner who was much more caring, calmer, much more encouraging, much more thorough, spent time, followed up with her, had her team follow up with her, and it just completely changed her outlook because she at least felt heard, supported. She felt that she had been advised well, so she could be confident in the advice that was given by the doctors, and she could question her no end. And she could say, "Oh, I don't know about that," or, you know, "Why did you make this decision?" or "Why did you put me on that medication?" Instead of being told, "No, this is how you're going to do it." This is not somebody who's been around for 5 minutes and doesn't know anything. This lady's been around for 70 plus years. She knows herself. She, you know, she has a database of things that she is experienced in, and you can't just brush it aside and pretend that you know better than the patient that's sitting in front of you. You've got to be, the doctor's got to be the vessel for support. That's what they've got to be. They've got to be the vessel for support, not the ego or the, "I haven't got enough time for you." If you're a GP and you don't have enough time for your patients, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I know that they're under a lot of pressure from insurance companies
Yeah.
and the health system, this health systems that they're part of. Sometimes I don't know, maybe they have to meet quotas, or I don't know what it
Yes.
is. But
Timelines,
when you're,
deadlines.
yeah, and that's fine when you're dealing with generally healthy people, and you just need to see them in and out, just a quick checkup, and not somebody who's had a brain injury, not somebody who's had a stroke, not somebody who's dealing with such serious medical health issues. You know, you need to take a step back
I
and
received
care for them.
I received an amazing email just a few days ago from another stroke survivor who wants to come and share her story on the podcast. And she was a nurse who worked in a hospital on the stroke ward. And
Mm-hmm.
and she she's had a stroke now, and she says, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing when I thought that I was really aware of how to help and support stroke survivors. I had completely no idea." And it's part of that process is, okay, how could you? You're a stroke. You've never had a stroke, and you can never know what it's like. And we don't wish stroke on anybody. Nobody should have a stroke to know what we're going through. But her awareness of how ill-equipped she was, even though she was very experienced in the stroke ward, just went through the roof, because she knew that it was just a completely different game than the one that she had been playing. So she's keen to come and share that story, and I'm really looking forward to having her on the podcast. Hopefully we can organize it. Angie, we've covered a lot of the before. Let's talk about the after, because it's been 6 years now. So where are you at now? How has life evolved? How have you moved
Yeah.
on?
Well, at the advice of my doctors, when I was ready to go back to work, I mean, it took me a couple of years and a couple of hits and misses in my career and I took a major detour for a while. At one point when I was on long-term disability, and I had to be put on long-term disability for my mental health conditions, not for physical, but the mental health is just as serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I I opened a CBD store because CBD was something that helped ease some of my anxiety and depression, along with prescription medications and meditation, therapy. I mean, I've done it all.
Mm-hmm.
I have done it all. I went through an intensive outpatient program for anxiety and depression, and that probably saved my life. Um, and then I have gone back into a marketing communications career, but I deliberately took a big step back. I've always in my career been like climbing the ladder. What's the next rung on the ladder I can do? What's the next achievement I can reach for? What's the next big accomplishment? But my friend, my doctor said, I cannot let you go back to a job as high stress as you've been in before. She's like, if you want to go back into marketing and communications, I need you to take a big step back. So instead of going for a vice president or director role, I deliberately looked for like a middle senior manager role or middle manager role. Um, I wanted to make a certain amount of money because I have certain bills to pay, and I had reached a certain point in my career that I can't slide super far back because I was kind of the main earner in my family. Um, and I still kind of wanted to keep that role, but I didn't care if I was making as much as before or I had the title. That was a huge battle with my ego to be like, okay, I cannot, I can no longer say, hi, yes, I'm a vice president or a partner at this major communications firm. I deliberately took a huge step back so that I could have something less stressful because stress clearly played a part in in my, probably in my original stroke. I mean, stress is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have since, well, really taking a big step back. When I was at the height of my depression and anxiety and just getting over that, I needed something to do, something to get me out of the house, but I wasn't confident enough to go back to a communications role. So my husband and I decided to take a leap of faith and we opened a CBD store. We became entrepreneurs, small business owners. I did that for about a year and having some place to go during the day, having something to do to just build my confidence up little by little. And I'm talking baby step by baby step. Um, Finally, I started doing my marketing for my own little store. And I was like, oh gosh, I've missed this. I need to get back into this. And so I stepped back into a marketing communications role in the corporate world uh, a few years later. And now it's been 4 years or so. I've kind of had some hit or misses because I do find my emotional regulation at work is not as fine tuned. I do let things kind of, I do kind of say things before I think them through, and it gets me in a little bit of trouble. Um, but I know emotional regulation can also be something that's very difficult for stroke survivors.
Absolutely.
And I started writing my story. I started writing a book that I've since published. But when I first started writing it, it was really more so that I could document what happened to me, document my story for my family. And I released the first edition of it like 3 years ago, on the third anniversary of my stroke,
What's it
and
called?
I just sent that one to family and friends. That was called A Brain's Betrayal. Um, but I realized after sharing it with family and friends, I'm like, I didn't really tell the full story. And so I decided to rewrite it, because I'm a perfectionist. That's not a badge of honor. It's an admission. I'm a perfectionist. So I started rewriting it. And as I did so, I realized a lot of my story could probably help other people. Um, and so I published a book. It's called Invisible Scars: Stroke Survival, Recovery, and the Unexpected Mental Health Fallout. And that I published that in July, beginning of July, self-published. Um, and I've been giving free copies to stroke survivors, asking them to leave some reviews on Amazon, because I really want people to tell me how this book is affecting them and if it's helping them. And I've been speaking to support groups, stroke support groups, also mostly local here, but I'm trying to get the message out that if you are struggling with your mental health, you are not alone. And it does not have to be the end all be all. There is hope. And there are things that you can do even if you cannot afford to go to see a mental health therapist. And I wrote a tiny little book called Mental Health Hacks. And it's 10 easy hacks to help manage your anxiety and depression. And those are kind of talked about in Invisible Scars as well. But the Mental Health Hacks is a really short little, like 40-page, it's a booklet that just is like easy things you can do yourself, like journaling, meditating, getting fresh air, getting the right amount of sleep, eating right, um, establishing a routine. Having a routine is key for mental health management. And then one that's kind of strange, it's keeping your hands busy. If you're keeping your hands busy, it's very hard to be depressed.
Tell me about that.
Um,
Tell me about that.
there's something between the connection between your hands and your brain. But I my therapist recommended that I take up, like, try to start crocheting or crafting
Uh,
or knitting or something. My sister is a huge crocheter, and so I said, teach me how to do this. And I have no patience. And I tried. I did it for a few days, and I was so bad at it, it's laughable. Um, but there's something between just keeping your hands busy, and it keeps your brain busy at the same time.
mindful.
And I don't know the science behind it, but
Mm.
it works. And then um,
I would
music.
imagine. I would imagine that when you're doing that, you're being mindful on the task at hand. You're also creating something, perhaps, if you're doing crochet or woodworking or whatever. So the whole thing is like it's a really visceral, and it's an emotional, and it's a mental experience, because you're focusing on something other than yourself. You know, you're creating something, perhaps. There's a beginning and an end. You're improving a skill, perhaps. You started at the beginning and you were terrible at it, and then later on you're a little better at it. So you go through the whole
Yeah,
process, and it's, I imagine, very therapeutic.
even if you're not thinking about it, because my sister will pick up her crochet needle and yarn and she can have a conversation while she's doing it. It's just mindless. But keeping your hands busy is really important.
Yeah,
And so really, there's so much you can do to manage your own mental health,
yeah,
and that you don't have to go to a mental health hospital like I did twice. Those places have a place,
yeah,
but they're really just meant to get you over the crisis. So to keep you from, taking your own life, or to keep you from harming yourself or
yeah,
harming someone else. Um, they are only meant to be like a temporary, um, just help. And then when they release you, they try to release you with a plan of action. So you're going to go see a counselor, or you're going to start a therapy. Um, sorry, I'm losing my words.
Yeah, that's
But they're just very, they
they're like
exist
a
to keep you on the
crisis.
track.
They're like a
Yeah.
crisis support system, so that they
Yes.
basically can handle the acute phase of your
Yes.
episode, and then from there, once things settle down, then there's a plan of attack that you can take action on,
Right.
and you can move
Right.
forward.
And it's hard finding a spot in those places. It's very hard, at least in the United States. I don't know how it is worldwide, but finding a bed in one of those hospitals is, for one, you have to have insurance, or you're just never going to find something.
Yeah.
But that's not the message I want to leave people with. I want to leave people with the message that it is in your own hands. There is
Mm.
so much you can do. Establish a daily routine, start journaling. I didn't want to journal either. I like to write, but I don't like to write about my feelings.
Uh-huh.
And I just, because I I have the horrible habit, I self edit myself. I write and then I cross stuff out, and it's like I'm trying to wordsmith and edit my own thoughts, and it's a horrible habit to have. But as a writer and somebody who's been a communicator her whole life, that's my career, it's hard to. But I learned how to journal and just start writing out my feelings and not to judge my words. And I don't even go back and read it. That's not the point. The point is to get it out of your mind, get it down on paper. And then meditation. I do guided meditation. I like to use apps, or sometimes I just find some guided meditations on YouTube. That stuff's free. Establishing a routine is free. Um,
The Recovery After
getting
Stroke
those,
podcast is free.
yes, yeah. And eating right, that's not free, and that takes some work, but it is so critical to
Yeah.
your health, your mental health, your physical health. And sleeping, proper sleep. I mean, when I couldn't sleep because I was having horrible insomnia, which was a side effect of some of my medication, it was a that is a form of torture, not being able to sleep. And there's so many things that you can do to manage your own sleep, and just, it's no screens right before bed. There are just
Mm.
some different, like, little tips to help you get better sleep.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you don't have to do all 10 of these mental health hacks at the
The
same
same
time.
time. Yeah.
Try one, pick one that you think you can stick with for a few days,
Yeah.
and then see how that's going. And then maybe add one more, maybe add, a handful, try them out and see how it goes. Don't judge yourself. I tell people to have grace, give themselves grace.
Yes.
Um, and that there is always somebody willing to listen. There are crisis lines that you can call,
Mm-hmm.
but there are simple, just daily things that we can do to help ourselves.
And if you're lazy like me, you just put on a guided meditation just before you go to bed, so you don't have to do any work towards it. And even if you fall asleep during that time, actually the guided meditation is still supporting you in helping you calm your state and then have a better night's sleep. And for me, that was a game changer. So
Yeah.
I would notice that my sleep would be far better if I put on a guided meditation. And my specific search was guided sleep meditation. And then you would find titles like guided sleep meditation to improve sleep, etc. And then I would listen to them before I went to bed during the day to make sure that at the end of the meditation, it didn't have some kind of a now wake up and come back into the room response, where sometimes you do get that. It was just stop talking and then fades away, and then it stops. And I'd put it on with my phone on one of those what do we call them, one of those little portable Bluetooth speakers, so that it wasn't right next to me. It was kind of down the other side of the bedroom. And then I had my phone set up so that it would snooze. It would go quiet after a certain amount of time, and it might be 30 minutes, and then the phone would automatically just snooze and go silent, so that I wouldn't have to shift over and press the stop button and interrupt my zone if I was in a really good zone, and if I was sleeping. So absolutely amazing tips. The things that you spoke about
which is what I love, is that you came to very similar conclusions that I came to. And that's the book that I'm writing. Is you've commented on it almost on exactly the same things that I've come to. The same chapters are going to be in there. The same topics of conversation are going to be in there. The fundamentals are the things that you really need to take care of. And it's like back to basics. Okay, so what can I do to support my healing? Okay, try and sleep better. Okay, am I doing something that's interfering with my sleep at the moment? Possibly. What am I doing? I don't know. When I go to bed, I watch stuff on my YouTube channel that are action, for example, action or drama or whatever, and the blue light of the screen plus the thing that I'm watching is stimulating me instead of helping me calm. Am I going out during the day so that the sun sees my face, so that my circadian rhythm knows that I'm in daylight and nighttime's coming? There's a couple of little basic tweaks that you can do that really do support sleep and make things differently. And one of the things that you shouldn't do is you shouldn't medicate and try and support your sleep with alcohol or drugs,
Right.
because it just doesn't actually help. It sedates you, but it doesn't allow you to go into the circadian cycle of sleep, and you never get to REM sleep when you've had alcohol as the device to get you to sleep, so to speak. You miss out on the really restorative part of your sleep, which is the REM stage. So, and if you can, and if you have to use sleeping pills just to get you through, again, that acute phase of I haven't slept for days or weeks, then that's fine. But again, sleeping pills are not a long-term solution, and you have to find out new sleeping habits. And there's an amazing book that I've read by Dr. Guy Meadows, and I forget the actual title of it now. I'll just search it while we're chatting. And it's probably one of the most shortest and succinct ways to describe how people can increase their quality of sleep. I'll have the links to it in the show notes.
And that's the thing, when we have brain injuries, we need a lot of sleep. And we might, I mean, I find myself 6 years later, I still need more sleep than I used to.
Yeah.
And so that to me says my brain is still healing.
Yeah.
You know, I place a ton of value on sleep. I mean, when work gets stressful, I still I'm like, okay, I'm shutting it off. I go to bed at like 8:30. I feel like an old lady now, but I will sleep for 10 hours. And I mean, my brain needs it.
Yeah.
And thank God I'm able to do that now.
Yeah. The book that I'm talking about is The Sleep Book. Very simple title, The Sleep Book.
The Sleep Book?
By Guy Meadows. So I'll have the links to that anyway, if anyone's curious. Did you ever feel guilty about having extra naps or sleep or anything like that? Did you ever sort of feel like it's unproductive?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard when you're kind of a perfectionist and always a go, go, go person. But the funny thing is, like, before my strokes, I was always able to take naps on the weekends, and I was a good napper. My best friend even got me a T-shirt that said "Nap Queen" because I could weekends I would make time for my afternoon naps. But after my strokes, I was not able to nap, and it drove me crazy. I would get these weird tingling sensations, and then I would start to almost like feel like I was going into a bad dream or something. And so naps, it took me a while to be able to nap again. I only feel guilty when I feel like there's something else I have to accomplish, and that maybe I'm napping just to procrastinate or something.
Okay.
But no, I don't feel guilty about needing my sleep. I need my sleep. I say, hey,
Good.
I'm getting older. I need my beauty sleep, if nothing else.
Okay, good. That's great. I love it. Don't feel guilty about it. I agree. So this book that you wrote, Invisible Scars, I'm going to read a little bit about it just from the Amazon page. It says, you survived the stroke, but now you're dealing with the painful uncertainty, anxiety, and depression left in its wake. You're ready to take control and take back your mental health. You just need a little help. That's just the first paragraph of the about section of that book. And that's such a beautiful way to describe what people need. They need a little help. And if you ask for help, I'm certain that most people who can help will help. They will definitely help. And if they can't help, they might be able to put you on to somebody who can help. That's that's the role that I play a lot of the times. So I had a lady whose family contacted me. They're in Canada, and she had an ischemic stroke, but a brainstem stroke, and that meant that she's locked in, and the family are trying to work out what to do to move the recovery forward. And they contacted me in case I was able to support or help in any way. And I really can't in that space. I don't know what to do, but I was able to put the family onto Clodagh Dunlop, who is a person who had a stroke, who I had on the podcast many years ago, who was also locked in for a period of time, and then managed to many years later go back to work as a police officer in Ireland. And it's such a cool thing. All I did was reach out to Clodagh, and Clodagh said, yep, no worries. I'm happy to help if I can, answer any questions or guide the discussion so that it can come from a patient who's been in that space rather than people who haven't been in that space and don't know what it's like. And that's the thing. If you just ask, you might not be able to get help from that specific person, but they might be able to give you an idea of the type of person that can help you. And that's the same reason why the 7 questions to ask your doctor after a stroke PDF download from my website exists, so that people can take that to the doctor. And even if the questions seem basic or simple in their nature, they are enough to create a conversation, and it puts the stroke survivor in that position of leading the conversation rather than being passive in it.
Yeah, I love it. And I don't know. I feel like talking about my recovery and being able to help other people by sharing my story in whatever they can take from it. It almost feels like it's my new purpose, honestly. Like I can work in corporate America the rest of my life, maybe, but does it bring me fulfillment? No. Writing books, I have found it's kind of my new passion. I just finished a book. It's not quite done. And it's kind of a follow-up to Invisible Scars. It's called Identity Crisis. You are not your career. Because when you have a stroke or another huge, medical problem or anything that takes you out of your career or completely puts a stop to the life that you're used to living, and then you don't know who you are anymore, it's so jarring. When I thought I couldn't work again in communications, I had no idea who I was. I was lost, and I thought that fed into my depression and anxiety, and I just was like, I need a purpose. People told me I should start to volunteer and do stuff like that, and I did, and nothing just felt like it was giving me a purpose. But writing my story, sharing it, and having people respond positively that the way they have, saying, I've had some reviews on the book saying how much it's helped people. And I love that. And I'm like, if that's why I had a stroke, maybe, I don't know, maybe some good can come out of it.
I love it, because I think I've discovered my purpose. And you imagine this is what my purpose is now, right? So I can go back to work. I can do all the things I did before, but it's just not the same. When I sit down to do a podcast interview, I get really excited, to learn, to delve deeper, to get questions answered, so that people listening who are going through what you and I went through, and they're early on in their recovery, can feel a little better about that. And their loved ones can also feel a little bit better about it. The thing that you said about identity, of course, in my book, because, there's a part in identity. Of course, in my book, there's a part about purpose. So these are
Mm-hmm.
universal truths that appear. And the thing about purpose is you can't, I feel like I never would have found my purpose if I went for purpose. Like I'm going to go to find my purpose. It's not going to happen. It came from helping other people. It came from
Mm-hmm.
shedding light in situations where there was no light shed before, where there was only darkness. I didn't know that I was going to find my purpose. It took about 2 or 3 years. That led to me being able to say that stroke was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not the physical stroke, not what it's left me with, but the ability to grow and to feel fulfillment and the ability to turn it into something positive. That never would have happened if it wasn't for 3 brain hemorrhages and brain injury and brain surgery. So
Yeah.
it's like what an encouraging story to hear it from you. To what it does is it validates me as well, and hopefully what that does is creates encouragement for people who have been thinking about putting pen to paper or sharing their story in a different way or supporting other stroke survivors. Without us, we can't heal as well. Without the community that we're creating, we can't heal as well. And you've been very prolific. I'm envious, if I'm honest, of your ability to get 3 books out in less than 6 years. I mean, it's fabulous.
Well, thanks. It's like something unlocked inside me. It's like, oh, I have a lot to say. There's a lot I want to say, and it feels so good to help people. It's funny because I've always been very buttoned up and honestly like very corporate minded, and growing up, I think I've always been kind of selfish, and it's always been about me, 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 and getting more, doing more, being more. And I think the stroke, if anything, and it has taken the full 6 years since having the stroke for me to realize it's not about me. It
Mm.
isn't about me. It's about everyone else. And using my story, using whatever I have to help other people, I can lose myself in it. As when I'm writing and I know I'm writing something that's going to help someone, I lose hours.
Mm.
I forget why I am, and that's when you have hit your purpose, is
Yeah.
when you're not thinking about the time it's taking, when you're not thinking about the money or anything else. It's just putting good out into the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably been the best thing about me having a stroke, is I am so much more in tune with myself. I know it's not about me anymore. I'm much less selfish. And that's it's such a good thing. And even my parents, my mom and my stepmom, my dad passed away a few years ago, but they're kind of like, wow, you're just, and my sisters too. It's like, you've changed a lot for the better. In your, like, this has made me a better person, and I'm grateful for that. So
That's
yeah,
great
it's like I am.
feedback.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, as we wrap up,
yeah.
what was the hardest thing about the stroke?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's a good question. I think for me, it was definitely the mental health crisis after the stroke. I was not prepared for it. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't invincible. Um, it was trying to come back from that. I mean, I can't believe that I sat in my bathroom one night and considered taking my life. I mean, it's unfathomable to me. I can't say that word. I should have used a smaller word.
Yeah, we finally found the chink in your armor.
I
Unfathomable.
did, yes. um, but that was the hardest part, and to think that I came that close after surviving a very, very serious stroke,
Mm.
and being so lucky to have that. I think how dark and scary it got was just, that was the hardest part for me. And coming back from it was not, it didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a pill I took from my psychiatrist.
Mm,
It wasn't any one thing. It was the combination of things, and it was me not giving up on myself. And trust me, I wanted to.
yeah.
But
What has stroke taught you?
probably just that life is precious, and just to give myself grace. Nobody's perfect. Nobody has to be perfect. I think it's also taught me that being a perfectionist has not served me well in life. Um, it played into everything that went wrong. And it's just, you have to step back and just appreciate the little things. And they always say, appreciate the small things and be grateful. I do keep a gratitude journal. I do 10 gratitudes a day. Sometimes I repeat the same things over and over again because in my heart, those are the things I'm grateful for. And I think it's just made me a better person. And just, yeah, I think that's what
That's
it's done
cool.
for me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell others who are listening, who might be early on in their journey and are freaking out or they're anxious about
Yeah.
the future?
Don't rush it. Strokes have a mind of their own, and the timeline is not something you can control, but it is something that you can help by going to rehabilitation and doing the exercises that your doctors are giving you, participating, being an active participant in your own recovery. But give yourself grace. You can't you can't put a timeline on it, and you also don't worry about how long it is taking you. Everyone recovers in their own on their own timeline, and you will recover. Just have faith, give yourself grace, and don't give up hope.
Yeah, fabulous. Invisible Scars is available for free in which format?
If Well, it's not available for free on Amazon, but I for Stroke Recover. So, like for your listeners, I can, if if it works on your site, I can give you a link so they can download a free copy
Okay.
of the PDF. But
Yep.
on Amazon, it's, I think right now it's like 99 cents or something like that if you just
Oh,
want the ebook. But you can also get it in paperback or hardcover. And then Identity Crisis will be out. I'm just waiting on some advanced readers to get back to me. I just want to make sure it hits home with not just stroke survivors or people that have had medical crisis, but, and ironically enough, I work for a company right now that is in the middle of a big corporate layoff, and they told us that it's going to be until the end of September. And so I may not have a job again at the end of this month. But you know what? I am not freaking out. It makes me nervous, but I also know I have the tools to get over it. And my career is not my identity. I enjoy my career, but it is not my identity. And so I'm better equipped if it happens to me. I'll be like, gosh, so ironic that I'm writing this book and putting it out right at the time that I might lose my own career. But I won't lose my identity because I know what my identity is now, and it's not my career.
that's beautiful. Angie, thank you so much. On that note, I really appreciate you reaching out. Thank you for sharing your story and making that link available to the listeners. I'm sure that there'll be a number of them that will absolutely download that PDF. I'm going to have all the links to your socials and to your book on the show notes. So for everybody who's listening, go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes, click on Angie's podcast episode, and then check out the links in the show notes. It's absolutely been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again for joining us on today's episode. As always, to learn more about my guests, including links to their social media and other pages, and to download a full transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes. Thank you to all those people who have already left a review. It means the world to me, and you are helping others in need
to find this type of content easier, and that is making their stroke recovery just that little bit better. If you haven't left a review yet and you would like to, the best way to do it is to go to iTunes and Spotify and leave a 5-star review there, as well as a few words about what the show means to you. Thanks again for being here and listening. As always, I do deeply appreciate you. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.